Before we run a great clip on Noam Chomsky, let's start with some pretext. Chomsky has consistently criticized U.S. foreign policy towards Iran, particularly the use of military intervention and economic sanctions. He argues that these actions have fueled anti-American sentiment in Iran and hindered diplomatic efforts. He emphasizes the historical context, citing U.S. involvement in the overthrow of Iran's democratically elected Prime Minister Mossadegh in 1953 as a key source of distrust. While critical of U.S. actions, Chomsky has also expressed concerns about Iran's nuclear program. He believes that a nuclear-armed Iran could destabilize the region and potentially lead to a nuclear arms race. However, he advocates for diplomatic solutions through dialogue and arms control agreements rather than military threats. Now off to this wonderful clip of Chomsky and following it some of his other concerns.
In Western policymaking circles and among political commentators, the Iranian threat is considered to pose the greatest danger to world order and hence must be the primary focus of U.S. foreign policy, Europe's trailing along politely as usual. This year is called the Year of Iran because of the danger of that enormous threat, which does raise a question. What exactly is the Iranian threat? If you read the public commentary, you don't get much of an answer. But there actually is an authoritative answer, which is ignored. The authoritative answer is provided by the regular reports to Congress by the Pentagon and U.S. intelligence agencies that come every year, reports on the global security. And of course, they include a section on Iran. Most recent was almost a year ago. The reports make it very clear that whatever the Iranian threat is, it's not military. It's all quote. Iran's military spending is relatively low compared to the rest of the region. In fact, it's less than a quarter of that of Saudi Arabia, and minuscule as compared with the U.S., of course. Iran's military doctrine is strictly defensive, designed to slow an invasion and to force a diplomatic solution to hostilities. Iran has only limited capacity to project force beyond its borders. They, of course, bring up the nuclear option and say that Iran's nuclear program and its willingness to keep open the possibility of developing nuclear weapons is a central part of its deterrent strategy. Well, the brutal clerical regime in Iran is undoubtedly a major threat to its own people, though it hardly outranks U.S. allies in that regard. But the threat lies elsewhere, and it's ominous. One element of the threat is Iran's potential deterrent capacity. Notice that that's an illegitimate exercise of sovereignty because it might interfere with U.S. freedom of action in the region. And it's, of course, glaringly obvious why Iran would seek a deterrent capacity. Just take a look at the disposition of forces in the region, including nuclear forces. 7 years ago, one of Israel's leading military historians, Martin von Crefeld, wrote that the world has witnessed how the United States attacked Iraq for, as it turned out, no reason at all. Had the Iranians not tried to build nuclear weapons, they would be crazy, particularly when they're under constant threat constant threat of attack by the United States, of course, in violation of the UN Charter, but remember that that doesn't apply to the United States. Whether they are, in fact, developing a nuclear capability, we don't really know, but perhaps so. Well, the Iranian threat, as described in the documents and the reports, goes beyond deterrence. Iran is also seeking to expand its influence in neighboring countries and thus to destabilize the region, as it's called. Notice that when the U.S. invades and occupies Iran's neighbors, that's stabilization. When Iran tries to expand its influence, say commercial relations with its neighbors, that's destabilization. That is absolutely routine usage in foreign policy commentary. So sometimes it becomes almost comical. Here's a prominent foreign policy analyst, James Chase, former editor of Foreign Affairs, rather on the liberal side, incidentally. He was properly using the term stability in its technical sense when he explained that in order to achieve stability in Chile, it was necessary to destabilize the country, namely by overthrowing the elected Allende government, installing a vicious dictatorship. Sounds contradictory, but it isn't if you understand the technical meaning of the terms. Well, other concerns about Iran, I have no time to go into. They're interesting to explore, but I think they simply underscore what the guiding doctrines are and their continuing status in imperial culture. That's very much in accord with the doctrines that were laid down by FDR's planners back during the Second World War. The United States cannot tolerate any exercise of sovereignty that interferes with its global designs. And the United States and Europe are, of course, engaged in punishing Iran for its threat to stability and trying to get it to become a more civilized country. But it's useful to recall how isolated the U.S. and Europe are. The non-aligned countries, which is most of the world, they have for years been vigorously supporting Iran's right to enrich uranium. Within the region, as I mentioned, the irrelevant public even strongly favors Iranian nuclear weapons. The major regional power, Turkey, voted against the latest U.S. sanctions motion in the Security Council, along with Brazil, which is the most admired country of the South, as polls show. Turkey's disobedience led to sharp censure at that point, but not for the first time. Turkey was bitterly condemned in 2003 when the government committed a major crime. It followed the will of 95% of the population and refused to take part in the U.S.-British invasion of Iraq. And that demonstrated its very weak grasp of democracy, which led to sanctions and sharp censure. Same today, after the 2010 Security Council misdeed, Turkey was warned by Obama's top diplomat on European affairs, Philip Gordon, that it must demonstrate its commitment to partnership with the West. Follow orders, in other words. A scholar with the Council on Foreign Relations asked, how do we keep the Turks in their lane? They're departing, something wrong. In their lane means following orders, like good Democrats, our style Democrats. Brazil's Lula was admonished in a New York Times headline. He was warned that his effort with Turkey to provide a solution to the uranium enrichment issue outside the framework of U.S. power is a spot on the Brazilian leader's legacy. In brief, do what we say. That's your function. There's kind of an interesting sidelight to all of this, which has been effectively suppressed. The Iran-Turkey-Brazil deal had been approved in advance by President Obama, presumably on the assumption that it wouldn't fail and that would provide an ideological weapon against Iran. That was revealed by the British Foreign Office, which released the letter of support for it after Brazil was censured. When the effort succeeded, approval quickly turned to censure, and Washington rammed through a Security Council resolution which was so weak that China readily signed and is now chastised for living up to the letter of the resolution, but not following Washington's unilateral directives, which go far beyond it.
Chomsky strongly criticizes human rights abuses in Iran, including the suppression of dissent and restrictions on freedom of speech and assembly. He believes that any engagement with Iran must prioritize human rights concerns and hold the Iranian government accountable for its actions. Chomsky emphasizes the importance of regional stability in the Middle East and argues that resolving the Iranian issue requires addressing the broader geopolitical context, including the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Well, I hope you like the video and give the channel a subscribe. Take care, bye-bye.